Well, the Prime Minister today declared a national emergency in northern New South Wales and announced a raft of support measures for impacted communities, including extra payments for those in the worst affected areas. One of the big questions that remains unanswered is if more could have been done in the early days and how we better prepare for future natural disasters, because this is Australia after all, and we're going to have plenty more floods and fires. Well, Heston Russell, a retired Special Forces major and founder of the Australian Values Party, has been calling for a full-time National Disaster Relief and Humanitarian Assistance Force. He joins me now from our Brisbane studios. Heston, thank you for your time. You've just returned from the disaster areas in northern New South Wales. How did you find the recovery effort?
Well, g'day, Rita, and great to talk with you. And first and foremost, I'd really like to give a shout out to all those community groups who have been there doing the heavy lifting since day one in the areas we visited, Mullumbimby and Lismore. And it's very important to note the difference between the initial response and now the recovery that is now underway. And you'll hear a lot of emotion around this topic, particularly that initial response. And first and foremost, I think it's so important to acknowledge that you're dealing with grieving people, you're dealing with trauma, you're dealing with emotion and anger and resentment. And there's been some very irresponsible reporting feeding into that. But as you said in your opening remarks, and as myself and my party have been campaigning for and will be campaigning for, we have that many natural disasters in this country. And from what has again been demonstrated there on the ground in New South Wales is that our response is too siloed and lacks the ability to actually help those on the ground when it is needed and where it is needed. There are so many different assets and organisations broken down between state and now federal jurisdictions with the calling of a disaster zone. We need to flatten and compress that and focus on the actual provision of that support to the people on the ground. And that's not just throwing money at these problems. It is having people who can be there, who can set up communications, who can help to coordinate all of the incredible community support that is going to be there and happens when Australians get activated to support each other, and then brings in all of the other elements and agencies precisely and efficiently to provide that support. And the key part here, Rita, is this is also an industry that can be exportable and be one of our greatest commodities in our region, providing Australians to support these same disasters within our near neighbours as they continue to experience the same conditions that we do, and only are continuing to occur as we expand and develop as a developing nation.
Now, we've seen the ADF step up outside of their usual role. We saw that happen during the COVID response and again with the floods. What are your thoughts on this assistance? Is this how we should be utilising the ADF?
For the last 2 years, the ADF has been called in every single time there has been a government failure or a crisis. And it's incredible to see even now some major generals from the Army step up to be those in coordination of these efforts. And as a military veteran myself, that's because the military systems and processes work, because they're focused on outputs, they're not focused on commercial gains, and they come from people with lived experience in these areas. And the use of the military in this case is definitely a great opportunity. But the key thing is, Rita, people are all very quick to judge the military for not responding at the same time, but those same people need to go and get research themselves on what the defence assistance to the civil community and call-out procedures are, and ask themselves, if we were drawn into a proxy conflict or some other conflict within our region and our military forces were committed, who would be there to simultaneously support the people on the ground in Lismore and Mullumbimby and the Northern Rivers areas and any other natural disaster we have in this country? One of our biggest strategic risks we have at the moment is those simultaneous conflicts, issues, crisis, natural disasters, taking away our defence force to do their primary role, which is to defend and protect our nation, and leaving those Australians at home without any helicopters, without any boots on the ground, without any people in uniform to serve and support them here on the home front. And that is why we need to step up a full-time organisation. Think of mixing a US National Guard with a Peace Corps concept, unarmed civilians who have a training liability that doesn't involve as much as is required with the Defence Force, who can be the immediate response on the ground and help to coordinate federal assets straight down to local council and communities, without this federation layer of states in between that keeps getting in the way for the last 2 years of actually supporting those people on the ground.
It sounds like a fantastic idea, Heston. I hope people listen to you and we get this up, because we're going to have this happen over and over again, and it's in those early days when people need the help the most where it's not there, because like you said, all these different authorities from local, state, federal are trying to coordinate who's going to do what. Heston Russell, thank you so much for your time this evening.